He was a St. Louis City cop, and it's Tim's family who first inspired my husband and I to homeschool. Did you know that, Producer Jason?
No, I did not know that.
Mm-hmm. We met his family. He invited us. I don't know how we got to know him. I think John knew him from YRs. And went over to his family, met his children, and thought, that, those kids are what we want. And, of course, they're all amazing children, and Tim himself is amazing. He moved on to be in the FBI counter-terrorism unit, and now he works in Hollywood as a consultant, writer, and producer who continues to fight to defend our culture from enemies, foreign and domestic, especially the onslaught from the entertainment elite that hates God, our military, and our way of life, and us. Tim has consulted on, written for, and produced on some of the top shows in television. You've seen his work on NCIS Los Angeles, The Unit, Lie to Me, Criminal Minds, and has written feature movie scripts which are now in development with some of the biggest movie makers in the world. Welcome to the Dr. Gina Show, my good friend Tim Clemente.
Hey, Gina, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's good to have you back on. You've been on the show many times before. I was reading in the Daily Caller about this policy, I guess you'd call it. I don't know. There's probably a better word for it than that. This Homeland Security guideline, I guess, advising deference to pro-Sharia Muslim supremacists. This is really a different standard than the one that they have for right-wing extremists, is it not?
Yeah, it seems to be very different. When you read that Homeland Security document, there are aspects of it that are right on. They're spot on that I agree with. And there's other aspects like the totally deferential treatment, and that you can't have Muslim reformers doing training because it might be offensive to those that don't believe that there needs to be any reform in the Muslim world. And it's kind of scary that they literally target returning veterans coming back from war, anybody that holds pro-life views, which are very mainstream in America. I would say it's a clear majority of Americans, especially young Americans today, that are pro-life. So to think that they're a greater threat than Islamic extremists, it's not only scary on the faith that they're wrong, but it's scary that they look at their own, the citizenry of this country that way.
Yeah, it really is. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, through such tainted, I guess they rose-colored glasses. I don't know what color their glasses are that they would think that way.
Yeah, it does seem like a complete double standard, and so this policy that we're hearing about with the IRS being discriminatory against conservatives may just translate pretty well, it sounds like, to Homeland Security. Do you think so?
It seems to be across the board with the government right now, with this administration, that they just don't trust the right. And the IRS, those individuals in Cleveland, I don't believe acted autonomously. I believe that there were policies set forth somewhere in the chain of command to either slow down or hamper right-wing groups that were seeking tax-exempt status. And in effect, that directly affects the election this past November, because all these groups that could have been out there getting out the vote and doing other things and fundraising weren't able to do so when they're waiting 2.5, 3 years to get the protected tax status. So it's something that had a very dampening effect, I believe, on this past election.
Yeah, it sounds like
scary in itself.
Yeah, the policy actually it reads like this: right-wing extremism, the current economic and political climate fueling resurgence in radicalization and recruitment. It warned of the dangers posed by pro-life advocates, critics of same-sex marriage, and groups concerned with abiding by the U.S. Constitution. How are groups concerned with abiding by the U.S. Constitution scary to the Homeland Security folks? I really don't get this, Tim.
Well, here's the problem: is that you have analysts within the Homeland Security, within every federal agency and most law enforcement agencies, and these analysts, they can have their own agenda. So they dig something up and they say, look, this is what Timothy McVeigh believed in. Look, this is what Eric Rudolph believed in. And so Eric Rudolph was pro-life. Eric Rudolph was opposed to abortion and homosexuality. And so, look at all these other people that are now opposed to abortion. Look at all these people that are opposed to homosexuality. And so now they make that connection. They do a big, graphic on it, and they show this many people, so it's expanding, and they consider that radicalization. Those that are radically pro-abortion, and there's a great number of those that work within the federal government and within the bureaucracy. To them, we are a threat, because we're a threat to their way of life being, I want to be able to make that choice to kill my baby anytime, any place, for any reason. And any threat to that, they consider as a greater threat. So, the term threat politically means one thing. Yeah, we're a threat to them politically. But to turn that then and make it a threat terrorist-wise is a tremendous leap. And I've been pro-life my whole life. I know you guys have been since we've known you these many decades. And neither of us would consider violence. We would consider prayer and peaceful means to try and stop abortion. And we've done that. The vast majority of pro-lifers would. So to consider that anybody that becomes radically pro-life is then assumed to be a threat physically to someone is ridiculous, utterly and completely ridiculous. And it's a terrible waste of our resources, the federal government, to be out looking at pro-lifers when the truly radicalized people we need to worry about are the Sarnovs of the world that come here, become radicalized either before or after they're here, and then in that radicalization do violence, as they did at the Boston Marathon.
Well, leftists would argue that, you can't just go profiling these people. You can't go accusing an entire population of a Muslim population for the crimes of a very, very, very few. So how do you respond to that accusation by the left?
Well, I agree. You can't. We can't say there's a billion Muslims in the world. We can't say all Muslims are a threat. Because, first of all, that would be a tremendous waste of resources. It's like saying you're going after Eric Rudolph, so you're going to watch every pro-lifer in America. Ridiculous. What you need to look for is when somebody becomes truly radicalized. I don't mean in the left's version of radicalized,
right,
talking about us in this Homeland Security document. I mean Tamerlan Sarnov radicalized,
right,
where they become radicalized and he's in a mosque and he's screaming and yelling at the imam because he's talking about things that aren't radical.
Mm.
That requires the people in that mosque, the fellow Muslims that are sitting there that are praying with this guy, to do more than just say, hey, if you're going to talk like that, please leave. You have to do more, because when somebody gets to that point, there's still a chasm even between radicalization and violence. But there's those that start to cross that chasm slowly, and it's noticeable to the people around them. The 19 hijackers of September 11th, they were in mosques, they were hanging out in clubs, they knew people. They knew people that knew that they were not only radicalized, but they were intent on violence. And those are the people that have to stop them. So my take on the Muslim community as a whole is that we need them to stop this. Much the same way if we were in Northern Ireland in the 1970s and we were Catholic, we would need the Catholics there to stop the IRA, because they're the ones that are going to know who's the guy that's tinkering in his garage, for every single night of the week, and he's probably building bombs, and lo and behold, he builds a bomb. Same thing with Tamerlan Sarnov. He and his brother are in that apartment, and they're buying fireworks. They're driving to other states to get fireworks. They're doing all these things, and they're not doing it in a vacuum.
Yeah.
There are people that saw aspects of it and didn't react to it. And that's what's needed, because the ones closest to those that become radical are the ones that will most be able to identify that radicalization and notice the change towards violence.
And I get that, Tim, but you know what? I have to be honest with you and say that I don't see the media asking the really obvious question. It's just like the 800-pound gorilla in the room to me from a press perspective, and that is, when Westboro Baptist came out and did all the despicable things they did, the people protesting them were the Baptists. They were screaming foul. They were saying, no, wait, where are the protests of the sects of Islamists who do these things? Where are the protests of this? Where is the outrage? Where are the imams going on Fox News and everywhere else that they can get on and saying this is wrong and horrible? Why don't we see that? Why is no other media asking that question?
Well, the reason we don't see it is because, unfortunately, Islam, like Christianity, is broken up into many, many different sects. And it's primarily Sufism, the Salafists, that are the really, truly radicalized, that believe in jihad. And there's kind of even a split in Salafi Islam of whether that jihad is more ethereal or violent. And the Salafists, they have no leader. So there's nobody at the top can say, oh, that's not what we believe, that's not what we believe. So they kind of it's every man for himself. That creates a problem because there is nobody that has the one voice of Islam. But what you're starting to see now, and it's just a ripple in the water right now, but within the Muslim community around the world, there are Muslims themselves, not even imams, but regular individuals that are crying out just like you just did. I have many Muslim friends having worked in terrorism in the Middle East for many years and in Africa, and they are starting to write letters to the editor. They're writing to Islamic and Muslim websites saying, "Why are you quiet? It's us. We're the problem. The fact that we are quiet is why the Muslim community is generating the Sarnafs of the world,
right,
the suicide bombers and everything else." And so I think you're going to start to see a truly grassroots groundswell. And it's going to take a while because, unfortunately, they don't have a mechanism. They don't speak out against each other because in the Muslim world, shame is a very big thing. It's a terrible thing to shame another. It's better to kill innocent people than to shame someone in their way of thinking. So, it's, the more westernized they become, the more secularized they become, the more you're going to see outreach. And I've experienced that outreach because I've worked with many Muslims counter-terrorists, guys that were completely and unabashedly on our side in the war on terror, even though they were Muslims, practicing Muslims.
Right.
So, there are a few, but they're not vocal, and some of the ones I know are starting to become vocal, so that's a hopeful sign.
Well, we're almost out of time, but I really wanted to touch on your work in Hollywood because you've done so many exciting things, and I think the question that my listeners really want to know is, how do you survive as a conservative in the film business? And then, secondly, are things changing at all? Are there more conservatives in the film industry today? Talk to us about it.
Yeah, there are more that are coming out of the closet, I would say. There's a couple thousand that I know of personally, and there's others that stay quiet, and there's a lot of guys that work on very big shows, stars, headliners, of some of the top shows on TV that live very conservative lives, and the way you can tell is you don't read about them. You don't hear them spouting off. They go home to their family at the end of the day, and they live their life. And their politics is separate from their public life, and that's great. But the problem is that the most vocal ones, the Rosie O'Donnells and all those that come out very publicly about their politics and their private lives, those are the ones we see the most, and they're the ones that are touted by the media.
Right.
But there is hope. I mean, things like Act of Valor last year, the movie that came out about Navy SEALs, that featured Navy SEALs. That's done by a couple of guys that were stuntmen, that became directors. They directed commercials. They worked on some feature films, and then they did their own feature films. And it was an astounding success. And it was an astounding success not because of the great acting, because it didn't have much great acting. It had guys that are operators, pretending that they're operators. And the action was great, but the reason it did well is because it promoted God, country, and family as the three most important things in those guys' lives. And it was very sincere to that, and that resounded with the American public in a way that Hollywood did not expect.
Right, which I love when they wake up to that reality every time a good conservative film is made. I mean, and it's not even about the politics of it. Like you said, it's just about the moral fiber of this country that is what it is, and it seems like Hollywood just cannot clue into that. And when they do occasionally, one slips by, these movies are doing very well.
Yeah, well, the filmmaker on that was a guy named Scotty Waugh. It was actually two guys, Mike McCoy and Scotty Waugh. And for almost a year, Scott was trying to sell that film. Because they completed it, they did it, and then they didn't have a distribution deal, so they were trying to sell it and get a distribution. And for literally 14 months, they were showing it to all the studios, all the distributors, trying to get it sold, and having no luck. Then, lo and behold, May 1st, 2011, Osama bin Laden gets killed by Navy SEALs. And now the Navy SEALs are the big talk of the town. So this little movie that Scott Waugh made about Navy SEALs, starring Navy SEAls, all of a sudden there's a bidding war for it. They sold it to Relativity Media, one of the biggest distributors in the world now. And it got out there, and it made $70+ million at the domestic box office for a movie that cost about 10 or 12 million, which is a huge return on investment for a movie.
Awesome. That's awesome, and I know you're doing a lot of that kind of stuff too. What can we look for you lately? What work are you doing? Anything we can see?
Yeah, there's a new show coming out on TNT that's kind of a comedy, law enforcement drama that's going to be, I think it starts in July. It's called King and Maxwell. Right now I'm consulting on that. I worked with the actors last week in Vancouver, and I worked with the writers. So it'll just be a kind of a fun show about two former Secret Service agents. And it's based on David Baldacci novel.
Awesome. Well, good. Well, we'll look forward to that. Tim Clemente, thanks so much for being on the show with us today, and keep changing the culture. We need you there. Thank you so much.
You too, Gina. God bless.
All right. God bless you.